So welcome to this first part on Unit 514, problem solving and decision making. You've just watched a short video of a comical problem situation. They've got to make a decision. They fully appear to have investigated the problem, and they've got this map on the screen which shows lots of options, and then they've considered the impact as they discussed it on each of the individuals and from each of the options. They've done a bit of negotiation, and then they've identified the best option and made a decision. Yes, a comical situation, but we all get involved in much more serious decision-making, problem-solving situations on an everyday basis at work. And your knowledge and understanding of processes and techniques that you can employ will improve your problem-solving and the quality of the decisions that you make, and therefore lead into effective problem-solving. Decision-making is natural to some people. It's just like a trait. And therefore they find it easy, and for some people it takes a bit more effort, but it can be improved. Problem solving and decision making are important skills in business and in life. If we're going to solve problems effectively, we're going to come up with options, and then we're going to need to make decisions on which is the best option, and that is effective problem solving. But whether it's something that comes to you naturally or not, what is key is that you ensure you're clear about the nature, the scope, the impact of the problem, so that you can choose the right techniques and evaluate and select the best options to solve the problem. So that's what we're going to look at in this session. Right then, so our aim for this session is to understand problem solving and decision making techniques. So by the end of this session should be to explain the importance of clearly understanding the nature, scope and impact of a problem, explain the relationship between problem solving and decision making, evaluate the different techniques used for problem solving and decision making, and be able to assess the impact of organizational ethics and values on decision making. So let's get started. So, faced with a problem situation at work, what do we do? Well, we're all different, and some of us fly into problem solving mode like some sort of superhero. Love it, really want to get involved, but do they fully evaluate the situation? If they don't, they can come unstuck. Others, they may take their time or struggle a little bit. They may procrastinate and end up doing nothing, so not making a decision. What we need to do, firstly, is make sure we understand the problem, and in a minute we'll take a look at the nature, the scope and impact of problems. It's key that we recognise the relationship and the difference between two things we've been talking about. That's problem solving and decision making. If we're really saying effective problem solving, then decision making is going to be interrelated with that, because to be effective at making problem solving, we're going to have to make decisions. So before we start looking at some techniques and the relationship, I just want to make sure we're clear about the differences. So we've got a table come up on the screen, and we'll just look at some basic differences before we start moving on. So problem solving is about a method, something that's specific and targeted to reach or to decide on what that problem is, not to make the decision. It's about bridging the gap between the way things are, so what's been going wrong, and how they should be, what we want. It's analytical normally. It's about breaking things down and looking at all the pieces and all the details, and it can become quite complex if it's a major problem. It's predominantly focused on the past, because we're talking about what has happened and where it's been going wrong, and we're looking at why, how, what, who is responsible. Okay, so that's problem solving. Decision making is a far broader process, and it's a broader action outcome basis. So we're looking for what the outcome is. It's about, well, I suppose it's the art of making choices between the options. So we, in the problem solving, we come up with the options. In the decision making, we make that decision. It's got a psychological element to it, because it's not just about the best one. It's about values, emotions, and the environment. So the other side's analytical. But when we're making the decision, we've also got to be thinking about, are people going to be happy with that decision? Is it going to work? Does it fit with what we believe in? And it's focused on the future, not the past, not the problem. And really in decision making, we should have got to say there should be no blame, where we might be looking at in problem solving about who, how, what, who was responsible. in decision making, we're not blaming anybody because we're looking forward, looking to the future. So that really just outlines the differences, which I want to make clear before we start looking at problem solving techniques. To problem solve effectively, firstly, we need to understand the nature of the problem. And that can involve some investigation. We may easily see the symptoms or the outcomes of what's happening with the problem, but what type of problem is it? Quick fixes like the superhero seem attractive, they may be convenient, especially if we're part of the problem, but bad problem solving in the end wastes resources. And the problem usually resurfaces at a later stage and often in a worse situation. So we need to fully understand what the situation is. We could use the 5 whys to question and to get to the real issue. There's some details about that in the resources if you don't know what I'm talking about. And we need to decide what type of problem it is. We can normally categorize them into 5 categories. The first being people-related problems. So things between individuals, team members, it could be customers. If it's general staffing, it'd probably go into resource recovery in a minute, but examples could be include individuals arguing, teams failing to work together, individuals not performing in a particular function, I don't know, an individual needing flexibility in their hours. The next is processes. So we're normally talking about here, processes are where a series of events linked together, structured activity. So it could be to do with monitoring, measuring, control of functions, tasks or activities, something that's failed to being completed, not achieving a desired outcome, so final checks not being done before dispatch, so there's problems with stuff, people didn't follow process and procedures, incorrectly submitted tasks or orders. Then there could be system problems, so things that are set to work in a particular row, a particular pace. Examples could be an automated order that's failed, or double bookings for an online booking system, route planning software not planning the optimum route, etc. And then there's problems based on communications, as we've talked about in Unit 503, where it's to do with misinterpretation, misunderstanding, messages not being received, or the wrong method of communication used. And finally, resources. And we define resources really as something ready to use when it is needed. So there again, straight away, if things aren't ready when needed, they cause problems. So it could be equipment, it could be supplies, it could be time, money. And as we said, people-related problems that are about general staffing will normally come into resources because it would be incorrect numbers of staff, not the right skills, etc. So 5 categories, but we need to clearly decide what is the nature of our problem because it will make a difference to how we deal with it. Next, we need to look at the scope, the coverage, the what and the who, and how many. So who does it affect? What does it affect? Is it about profits, people, equipment, customers, staff? Or does it affect, if it does affect staff, which customers, whose budget, which year? So we need to know about the numbers, basically scope, how far does it go? How deep does it go? And then we can look at who can resolve it. And by that I mean talking about the skills, the responsibility, and the authority to take some actions and do something about it. And then we can look at the impact, evaluate the true impact, so the damage that it could cause. And firstly, we can start thinking about, is it going to be a short-term impact, a medium-term impact, or is it something for the long term? And then based on that, we can start thinking about whether it's going to involve financial loss, loss of customers, disengagement of staff, lowering of morale perhaps, any legal consequences, or is it going to damage our reputation? So going to do a quick activity now to consolidate what we've done so far and help us to start building this activity to follow through the whole unit. I want you to start thinking that you need to identify a problem you've dealt with at work in the past, okay, so that you can reflect on it. I want you to outline the key aspects of the problem and explain the importance, and then look at using, explaining what data or information was gathered or used to work those things out. So there's a worksheet to do this on, and it has 3 parts. We're going to do part 1, so that's about outlining the key parts of the problem and what data was used to gather, and then you can upload that but keep a copy because later activities will be working on sections 2 or 3. So complete section 1 and upload it, but keep a copy because then you can add section 2 and upload that later, and then add section 3 and upload that later as we work our way through this problem that you've experienced. If you haven't actually dealt with a problem yourself in the past that you feel, now I'm sure you have, then think about one that you've been involved in, but try and think of a problem that you've actually dealt with in the past and sort it out.